Welcome to the Kaleidoscope of Possibilities, Alternative Perspectives on Mental Health. My name is Dr. Adriana Popescu. I'm a licensed clinical psychologist and leader in the field of mental health, energy psychology, addiction, trauma, and empowerment. In this podcast, we will be exploring mental health from a variety of perspectives, from the spiritual to the shamanic and beyond. What if mental illness isn't everything we think it is? What if everything we see as a pathology is actually a possibility? What else is possible with mental health?
Hi, everyone. Dr. Adriana Popescu, excited to be with you today for another episode of Kaleidoscope of Possibilities, Alternative Perspectives on Mental Health. I'm really enthusiastic about the conversation I'm going to have today with Katie Asmus. She is, hang on, let me get my paper here. Katie is a somatic and nature-based psychotherapist with a master's degree in somatic psychology, over 30 years of leading individuals and group programs out in nature, and a lifetime of apprenticing to ceremony and rites of passage. Katie says the essence of her work is normalizing, celebrating, and bringing compassion to what it means to be human. For the past 20 years, alongside maintaining a private psychotherapy practice, she has taught graduate students at Naropa University and Prescott College in the areas of somatic and nature-based therapies. In addition, through the Somatic Nature Therapy Institute, she created and facilitates both online and in-person workshops and trainings in somatic trauma work, ceremony and rites of passage facilitation, as well as in a wide variety of wilderness, adventure, and nature-based therapy skills. Having sat with thousands of people from around the world and from all walks of life, Katie is a tender of the thresholds and strongly believes in the necessity of following our deepest longing while simultaneously knowing and feeling our interconnection and belonging to the greater web of life. Welcome, Katie.
Thank you. So honored to be here and excited to have this conversation with you.
Yes, me too. We haven't actually really talked about a lot of these topics on the show before. And we have a shared kinship with Boulder, Colorado, where you are, right? And where I lived for a few years after college, like a block away from Naropa University. So it'll be fun to just connect in that kind of way. But
Yes.
to start us off, as we always do with this show, we love to get to know our guests. So tell us a little bit about your story and how you came to be doing the work that you're doing.
Thanks. Great. Well, let's see. I have been working out in nature in many different ways since I was 19 years old. Started in outdoor education, leading backpacking trips and canoe trips, rock climbing, all sorts of things for kids, youth, also some with adults, and just fell in love with nature, with working in the natural world, working with people, and wanted to bring that experience deeper. So decided to go to graduate school, studied somatic psychology with an emphasis in dance therapy at Naropa University, began that back in 1997. And at that point, the somatic work was considered woo-woo. We didn't have all of the research that we have at this point. And in my graduate program, every special project I had, I did on nature therapy. So I was always combining the somatic with the nature connection. And as I graduated with my degree, they started the first ever wilderness therapy master's degree program at Naropa University. And so at that point, I was as much of a wilderness nature therapist as anyone else. And I stepped in as the assistant director, and where I worked there, taught graduate students, and really helped develop that program and curriculum for 18 years. And along the way, all of this time also, I pretty early in my career created or developed a private practice. I had been also working with people with pretty significant trauma at the local safe house and rape crisis center. And so somatic trauma work became a big part of my work. And so through weaving these threads in so many different ways, I also have been incorporating ceremony through kind of coming from that world of nature and doing nature solos and background of really growing up in a family who was very into creating ritual, ceremony, rites of passage. And so these are the kind of strands that I have been weaving have been the nature connection, the somatic work, and the ceremony rites of passage. So I do that in many different ways and have also developed an institute where I teach other therapists and healers to weave these different pieces into their work with clients.
Fantastic. And I would love, like, right there, what you last said, because as you were talking, I was thinking, even for myself, like, as a therapist, I think I'm a bit naive in terms of like, how do we incorporate nature in the earth? I mean, I tell my clients, hey, you might want to spend more time in nature. We kind of see it, especially for folks who are maybe kind of just growing or curious about spirituality, but they're not sure about the whole God thing. They're not sure about organized religion, but like,
Yes.
what does it feel like to spend time in nature and feel connected and kind of get away from people and all their judginess and stuff? Like, we might talk about that. Or even some therapists might occasionally take their clients out on and do walking therapy, or like go on and do therapy outside somewhere. But there's much more to it than that, isn't there?
Yes. Well, I love this question. Again, I kind of want to back up just a little bit and say these three strands, the somatic piece, the nature connection, and the ceremony and ritual, are all, have been considered sort of cutting edge, sort of really bringing back these old ways of knowing. And I always say the best therapeutic modalities come up with grassroots, and all this, like, people are doing it in different arenas. And I can't tell you how many people I've met over the years who've said, I thought I made up nature therapy. I thought I discovered it. And then they found, oh, there's a whole field of people doing this work. And I've always been somebody that has been pretty creative and just like, well, let's try this. And if it's helpful for me, wouldn't it be helpful for my clients? But with nature therapy, there's so many different ways that you can incorporate nature connection into the therapeutic process. So for some therapists, it's just actually being outside, sitting outside, sitting on the porch, maybe going on a walk around the block. And just that, being outside, moving our bodies, having some fresh air. There's many studies that show, especially Japan has done a lot on with the forest bathing and looking at walking on a street with trees versus walking in a cement street. There are different impacts on our nervous system, our breath, our heart rate variability. But literally just being outside is often therapeutic for many people on a real neurophysiological level. And then there are, within the different fields of nature therapy, some people do adventure therapy where the activities like rock climbing or canoeing or hiking is part of the therapeutic process, really challenging ourselves, being in our bodies, feeling like we do something that we never thought that we could do, which raises our confidence and our, sense of what is possible. And I did do that for a long time, but over time, really because of accessibility purposes, my work has shifted more and more toward the relationship with nature. And within, as we go outside, nature is such an incredible metaphor for life, death, and everything in between. And we don't judge it. We don't say like, oh, this tree is better than this bush, or, we just look at the beauty of the diversity and the interwovenness of all of life. So I find that connection with nature can be a metaphor. It can literally be a relationship if we sit with nature, get to know it. Even I have my clients have conversations with the natural world and really evoke the wisdom in nature, and then the wisdom that is also mirrored within ourselves as we sit with this incredible ecosystem that is all around us. So can look really so many different ways.
Right. I'm thinking, even we have a therapist. I work at a drug and alcohol rehab out here, and we have a therapist who loves to do gardening with the clients, and and like thinking about like what's the therapy. I'm thinking about like having your hands like in contact with the earth. When you talked about the forest bathing, it made me think of earthing, and maybe you could explain a little bit of what that is. Like, how is it we've become so disconnected from the earth. Like literally there's like, because we wear these rubber soled shoes and whatnot, like we're not even like fully connecting with the electrical,
Yes.
bioelectrical, whatever, electromagnetic, that's the word,
Yes, yes.
energies of the earth. Like we're so far removed, or people are living in cities where all they see is concrete everywhere. There's no green anything.
Right. Well, I mean, at least in the US, I think with industrialization, with technology, there's so many, we can be in structures all day long. And then with the increase of our lives in connection with technology, right, on the computer, on the cell phone, I mean, more and more young people don't even ever have to leave their homes. People are going to school online. So many people are working online. And so I think that it's we're losing connection as a culture, as a species, because of these different ways of being and just different ways that our lives are running. And I think we are creatures of habit. So I think sometimes that the concept of inertia can be hard to sort of, when we're in a rut or when we're focusing on something, to get up and walk outside. But for so many people, literally getting up and walking outside is one of the quickest ways to shift our states, to shift our body mind states. And so I do a lot of consultation with therapists and supervision, and I find myself so often when they feel stuck with a client, I say, walk around the block with them, and or if you're doing teletherapy, have them get on their phone and walk outside or sit outside while you talk to them. Because if they're stuck, again, from a somatic perspective too, the best thing you can do is move. Otherwise, you're reinforcing those states. So I think, again, right, the earthing concept is so much about really the electromagnetic field of the earth, and that it has an impact on the energy of our bodies. And the more direct contact that we have with the earth, literally, like you're speaking about, walking with our bare feet, sitting on the earth, something is happening on a really biochemical level as we're in relationship with the earth. So another intervention that I use all the time when people are feeling anxious or ungrounded is just, let's sit on the ground. And the more of our body that is in contact with the ground, for multiple reasons. One, because of the earth, but also because more of us, just that contact on our skin helps us actually feel more present, helps us feel ourselves more grounded. So the earth, yeah, the earth is our ally, really, and it's here all the time. I mean, I guess that depends on where you live. For some people, it is harder to find a square of earth, but I think for most people, there's at least going to be a local park or creek or maybe a little backyard area, and a little bit can really go a long way.
Or rooftop. I think nowadays we're seeing more and more those grassy,
Yes,
rooftops. We have here in San Francisco, we have the Academy of Sciences has like a whole grassy, rooftop like that. And I think some buildings downtown are starting to do some of that. So
I
it's
love that.
it's
Yes, so
happening.
creative.
Well, and I mean, what I say to people also is you don't even necessarily have to be physically in nature to feel the energy of nature, right? Like the visualization, meditation, pulling that energy, remembering the last time you were, like all of it, a lot of us like to go on vacation to the beach, the mountains, or something. Like, remember the last time you were there and what that felt like, and then pull that energy through your body, or feel that energetic connection to the earth. We don't have to physically be there to have that connection. I think people don't realize that.
Yes, I'm so glad you brought that in. So I've been, of course, I shared working with nature for a very long time. And when the pandemic hit, I was about to, teach my 5-day nature training course. And so I decided to put it online. And I hadn't done much teaching online at that point. And so I put my first ever nature-based therapy training 2 days online. And some of it was visualization, some of it was sending people out to do different activities, even looking out their window. And at that point, two of the people in my course were in places where there was I forget the word, the like curfew or whatever. They like literally could not walk out of their house. And so I started getting really creative, help both for myself and helping other clinicians look at how do we bring nature connection online, indoors. And so one of the first exercises that I always do with my clients, if we're working in that way or when I'm teaching, is I send people out in their homes or their office, wherever they are, to find out who is here. So what are the nature beings that are right here in your space? And that could be plants, that could even be paintings of plants, animals in your space, looking out the window and seeing what you can see out the window. And inevitably, people are so surprised how much nature they often find right here. So then once we find that, we can start to do different exercises around, again, metaphor, conversations, even like looking out at the clouds, or again, sitting here with the plant that's in front of us. And the other big piece is visualization. And I don't know if you are an EMDR practitioner, but when one of the key interventions in EMDR is helping someone find a calm place in their mind. And like 9 out of 10 people inevitably choose a place in nature. So it is amazing. Like you said, people are drawn to beach vacations, but also when asked, what's a memory or what's a place you would like to be, the majority of people that I work with by far choose a nature place. And then you start to go, right, what happens in your body as you imagine this? What happens in your breath? And things start changing.
Yeah. Well, and I think it's so important, especially, I also specialize in working with trauma. So many people who have experienced trauma, especially chronic recurring abuse, PTSD, things like that, they don't feel safe in their bodies. They don't feel safe around other people, especially if they're trauma involved other people. And so oftentimes I find those people do feel safer in nature or with animals, plants, because that they're not gonna, they don't feel threatened. They don't feel like they're going to be hurt. They don't feel like they're going to be judged or manipulated or gaslit or whatever it is. So I think that, especially for those folks spending time out in nature, and maybe they've never felt safe in their bodies before, but to learn how to start to feel that way and to have the nervous system start to calm in the presence of this incredible, everything in nature is so powerful and soothing and supportive and nurturing if you'll allow it. Like, I think there's a tremendous amount of healing that can happen, especially for those folks.
Yes, I agree. I noticed the same thing, that often if people have been the source of trauma, then often being alone and or being with nature or animals tend to be, for many people, much, much safer. And so even as you say that, a couple things occur to me. One is also I'll give my clients homework to go find a place in nature that calls to them, that could be their backyard, could be somewhere out on the trail. So even, not having me there, right? Because I'm a human too. And even if I'm safe and supportive, sometimes people can't fully, drop in as much unless they're alone. So we also work with, how can you bring this home with you? The other thing that is, to your point, that I find is so incredibly supportive with nature connection for people with a lot of trauma is, if the body is now the place that is not safe, right? Our sensations are scary because we're afraid of overwhelm. Then asking people about, what are you noticing in your body is a process, right? It's a process of, how do we start to create safety here? But off in nature, there's so much sensory experience that for many people is neutral or positive, right? The beauty, the spontaneity, the sounds. And so I ask people to notice what they see that's pleasing, what they hear that's pleasing, textures. It's bringing them into their bodies. It's bringing them into the present moment in a way that's a little bit safer than, feeling what's happening internally.
Yes, yes. And I think even in the visual, when I have people do the meditative visualization piece, I have them really go there with all five senses, right? What does it feel like, smell like, taste like, because um and then you can just see, like, if you're watching, if you whether you're physically with them or over Zoom, if you can have a visual on the person, you see the shoulders start to relax, you can see they're taking a deeper breath. Things are starting to calm. Like, I can see and sense that their nervous system is starting to calm down, even if they're, again, just imagining it, but really going there with all their senses. And then what I see with the dissociated folks, right? Because we have a lot of traumatized people who are not in their bodies at all. They're dissociated. They're in a freeze response. It's not safe, right? I can see them starting to come back online because they are tuning into the five senses to something that feels safe to them. Where present time, tell me what you're feeling as you think about the argument you just had with someone. That doesn't feel safe
Right.
just yet.
Exactly. As a trauma therapist, also, I feel like it's such for many people, a direct connection to resource, right? To something that is good or pleasing or neutral. And again, just like looking outside of ourselves, I often say, find something that pleases you and then tell me about that. Let yourself take that in. And just like you were saying, and often just by putting their attention on something that is positive or neutral or pleasing, everything starts to shift in the body. And then we can point that out, look at, how they might do that on their own. But it's such an incredible tool.
Yeah. I want to shift gears a little bit and ask you about another thing that I think we've gotten very far removed from in our industrial technological age, which is that of ritual and ceremony. And,
Yeah.
um, for thousands and thousands of years, the humans have been on this planet. They've been engaging in practices that not only honor the earth, but one another, and rites of passage. And we really, especially in the West, I know in many other parts of the world, ceremony is still quite has a higher importance than it has in our world, especially in the
Yes.
US. But can you speak to that a bit? And what does your work in this arena look like?
Yeah, thank you. So I think about ceremony as saying yes to what is, and really a full body, full being um, conversation with the sacred other. So, something that typically when we're doing ceremony and ritual, we're doing actions to signify something. So, we're in our bodies, we're moving, we're also calling on meaning and maybe something beyond ourselves. So, we're really accessing kind of all parts of the brain, all parts of our human experience. And often ceremonies are done in support of moving through some life change or transition. And looking at from a rite of passage model, there's three stages to life change. The first one being ending. So the old way ending, the death of the old ways. Sometimes that's choiceful, right? I'm leaving a job to go to another job. Sometimes it's due to a traumatic experience that happened and now I've lost connection or capacity to something in my life. And other times that's developmental, right? I'm growing and becoming an adult or whatever that might be. So the first stage is ending of something. The middle stage is the liminal, the in between. I'm not who I was before in this particular way. I'm not who I'm becoming, which is for many people very uncomfortable, ungrounding, disorienting, and especially in our world where we just want quick fixes. It's very hard to be in, but it's so important to be there, to listen and live our way into the new identity in a way that's really authentic and empowered and true. And then the third stage being stepping into the new identity, really embodying that, owning it. And so typically, when we look at it that way, ceremonies, while they often include all of those stages, often the ceremony itself is honoring one of those stages. So honoring that we're letting go of something, we're burning something, burying something, whatever that might be. The liminal is really asking for support, asking the questions that are in our hearts, receiving guidance, receiving reflection from community as we're in the in between. And then on the other end, ceremonies of what we call incorporation or the new way might be celebrations, graduations, birthdays, like honoring something. And so the change is hard, and we don't take a lot of time to grieve what we're losing. And even when we're stepping into something choicefully, there's always losses. And so I find that really, one of the things I lead are wilderness quests. And so that involves typically 24 hours to 72 hours. So 1 day to 3 days of people going out on the land solo. And it starts with preparation, identifying intention. How am I going to work with my intention? Going out on the land, coming back, being welcomed back, and sharing their story. But really, I found that I feel like any of us could have ceremonies in us. All of us have things that we haven't fully let go of or grieved, or there are changes that we've gone through in our lives that haven't fully been felt, haven't been acknowledged, especially hard things. Um, and taking the time to pause in our lives and really put our attention toward these things and intention, often what it does is it really supports feeling the feelings that we couldn't feel at the time, having the care and witnessing for things that we couldn't have done, so that we can keep moving forward and really be present with what is now.
There's a lot of things I want to say in response to that. I hear a lot as you're talking about like energy, that ceremony ritual is working with the energy of something, like
Mm-hmm.
um, closing one chapter and releasing that energy,
Yeah,
right? Opening a new door and inviting in a new energy.
yeah,
How important that is. And I think we're glossing over and skipping over so much of that. Like I just think about in our Western, US culture in particular, where there's such a drive, right,
yeah,
to achieve and achieve more. And it's like people have just checked the box, like I achieved this huge thing, and already they're on to the next thing. They haven't
yeah,
even slowed down long enough to celebrate, like, oh my God, that's a huge thing. Or
yeah,
like I'm thinking right now, it came to my head when you were talking, how many people are doing the Ozempic and the GLP-1 weight loss drugs and having massive body transformation, which is great. But like, there's a whole psychological piece that I think gets skipped over
yeah,
when you're releasing all the old identity, the old energy that was held in your body, maybe even in the fat cells. Like we're not even acknowledging any of that and just jumping to that. It's like when you skip on a old school CD, right? Like you're just skipping to the next track. That's what I feel like. It's not like a record with the nice grooves and the analog. It's like jump, 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 right? Which is kind of the different. Like in a sense, energetically, I feel like that's a lot of the subtext of what we're saying. Nature is very acoustic and analog, and we live in this digital age of zeros and ones, and right? Like there's a lack of flow or something. It's hard sometimes to verbalize these things, but I think you get the gist of it.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it's fascinating that you just use that example, because the word that came to me was digest. That ceremony helps us slow down and digest the experiences that we've had. And to your point, if we look at nature as a mirror and as a teacher, we have the seasons. And especially, I mean, we have different seasons depending on where we live. But where I live, there's, 3+ full months of heat and light, and 3+ months of snow and cold, and then the in-betweens. And that really, those different seasons are, help us to go inside and reflect and look, be a little quieter at stages in our lives. Contemplate, where are we now? What's still working? What am I doing that's not even serving me anymore? And so ceremony is really supports kind of slowing down, reflecting, looking at what really is important now, what kind of support, guidance, mirroring do we need from ourselves, from the earth, from community in order to kind of update the files, right? To digest big things that have happened, to mine the jewels as opposed to, or let go and grieve, as opposed to just moving on to the next experience of life.
What do you think the cost has been, to us individually and as a culture, to have moved so far away from that?
Yeah, I mean, the first thing that comes up is disconnection. And I think we could say that about so many things, but disconnection from our bodies, disconnection from our emotions, disconnection from our communities. And ceremony is so much about like listening to what is, what is right here, right now, what needs to be felt, what needs to be expressed, what needs to be cleaned up in our relationships. And so I think that disconnect is just one other example of all the ways that we could say colonialism, or right, all the ways that we are body mind disconnect, earth human disconnect, and ceremony similarly. And I think one of the challenges that I find, especially again living in the US, is that so many people who, especially like European descent, I mean, many descent at this point, have lost connection with their cultures, have lost connection with their like spiritual, even practices, spiritual ways. We don't have a lot of collective practices in this country because there's so much diversity in backgrounds. And so I think people get they don't have that connection in their family lineage in this particular lifetime. And so it can feel awkward because ceremony really is about just being authentic. It's about speaking what's true in your heart, but people haven't necessarily had structures or kind of forms to engage, whether that's prayer or practices or ceremonies. So it can also feel very awkward and hard for people to kind of step in without some support or guidance in creating something that is really authentic for them.
Yeah, and I think of as you're speaking, or they have had negative experiences with ritual and ceremony, which kind of sometimes organize religion, for example, or people may grow up in some sort of cult like group, right? Where there is an emphasis on ceremony and ritual, but also in a way that maybe doesn't feel aligned for them, or all the shadow side of, yeah, abuse of power, right? And things like that, so then it gets all muddled up, and then now you've got trauma sort of mixed in with what was supposed to be spirituality, and so that really is very confusing for a lot of people. And I'm sure you've worked with tons of clients, I have too, who've had that type of religious or spiritual trauma, and so for them to heal from that, and if you're going to suggest ceremony to them, I can see where there would be, no way, I'm not touching that.
Definitely. Well, and I also think, and another added layer of complexity is with attachment, or different attachment styles, attachment experiences that often our relationship with God or spirituality, our attachment experience can get kind of transferred onto that. So can feel like, oh, something beyond me is supportive, or it's judgmental, or whatever those experiences have been. So I think both experiences in this kind of with authority, with humans, and then also with religion and spirituality definitely impacts people's perceptions in that way. And so when I work with clients and I have an impulse to bring in ceremony and ritual. Well, one is I would say I use ritual in my sessions in that, ritual is just something we do over and over to help us shift states or anchor into the present moment. So I always begin and end my sessions similarly. Like we do some breath, we do some orienting to the present moment and what's in their heart for today. And I think those kind of rituals, they don't have to be spiritual, but they can really help people just know what to expect, create kind of an energetic container. And then if I'm having an impulse to do something more ceremonial, one, when I do my intake with clients, I'm asking them all about, what's resourcing for them, what's been hard and or traumatic or different things. So I actually get a sense at the beginning of what their connection with spirituality is, as well as nature and many other things. But if I don't know or I'm not sure, I'll say, I'm curious about, do you engage in ceremony, or what is that, what comes up for you when I say that word? And this is something really significant you're sharing with me. And I wonder if it would be helpful to do some kind of honoring with this. And so I'll see, what is their response? And if it's no, definitely not. Okay, great. We don't need to go there. Often I get a lot of curiosity, even if people don't have a strong relationship with ceremony, curiosity is very common. Like, tell me more. What could that look like? Or, I'm not in any religion, so can I even do ceremony? And so if that's the case, if there's openness or curiosity, then we can open the dialogue about what that could even look like, what's meaningful for them. And I mean, one of the things I do is I teach a 9-month ceremony and rites of passage global training online with a colleague, Hoeatea Bryson, in New Zealand. And we have people come from all over the world. And this common reasons are, some people are doing ceremony, but are like, can I do this? Do I have permission? Other people say, it's in my heart, but I don't know where to start and I want to do it authentically. Some people are doing a lot of ceremony, but they think, how do I bring it to other people? And one of the things that we created this 20-page ceremony creation guide that we teach with, and we give, actually, it's like a freebie online. I can connect you with that also. And it's really looking at step by step, like, what has meaning to you? What are you honoring? Are there any symbols that you want to bring? Are there any actions you want to take? Who do you want to be there, if anybody? And so it's this, when you break it down, it's so simple. It's so human. It's just like, let's take a moment and really honor what's happening in our lives.
I think there's a real hunger for it. There's a real drive for it. There's a real curiosity and interest in traditional healing practices, ceremonies, rituals. I mean, the whole psychedelic movement is a big part of that. I mean, I myself was in Brazil last year with some shamans doing ayahuasca for the first time, and there was a tremendous amount of ceremony and ritual and everything that went into that. And so many people, I mean, I think there are attempts, even like with Burning Man, and the burning of the man, and the effigy. There's so much sort of traditional indigenous like practices, and yeah, people are sensitive. They don't want to culturally misappropriate something, and they don't know where to start. Maybe they feel weird about it, being like a white person of privilege. Who am I to engage or to wear, like even what I'm wearing from Brazil. Sometimes I wonder, like, is this going to offend somebody that I'm wearing, things that maybe a shaman might wear in a traditional culture, So I think there is some awkwardness, but there's also the drive and the curiosity. So I guess what I would ask you is, Katie, if people like want to take another step in this direction, like, how can someone even start?
Ooh, that's a great question. Well, so, I mean, again, I would say, I think part of this is looking at what's the definition of ceremony. And again, like you gave some great examples of ways that people are being drawn to it currently. And I think that it is in our DNA. The term rite of passage came from a cultural anthropologist who saw that cultures across time had ceremonies for big life transitions, and that was pretty common in most cultures. So I think there's something that we are drawn to celebrate. We're drawn to grieve. We're drawn to honor. And without, having these really collective cultural ways, we make things up, or we, people are drawn to these different pockets. And I even think about fire, like being at a campfire, how much that is a place of gathering, and how much that, so many people of different ages, something happens at that campfire. So I think one is starting to look at, like, what is the definition that we're, of ceremony. And then also, I think in your examples, people often think, well, how do I even do it? Do I need to light sage? Do I need to have feathers? And no. So like when we teach it, we say, well, what are you honoring, and what do you want to do to honor that? So think about it. In the US, many people, common things that we celebrate are birthdays at the decade, right? So when I turn 30, 40, 50, 60, like those are moments we go, oh, this is big. I need a pause. And how do I want to honor this? So if you think about it as something like that, like, okay, I'm having a significant birthday, and not everybody likes to celebrate that, and we think, well, what does this mean to me this year? What does this mean for this decade? Do I want people to be there? Do I want to go do this alone? Similar to really any kind of ceremony honoring, we might think, okay, this is a big experience in my life. What's going to help me feel what I need to feel, express what I need to express? Is that going to be going, taking a half day off work and going up on the hiking trail and journaling and sitting in nature? Is it going to be calling my friends together and sharing the story of what happened and receiving reflection or something like that? So I think just starting to think about, what do I want to honor, and what would actually help me to process it, to take time to feel what needs to be felt.
Wonderful. And then kind of one last thing I'm curious about, I don't know how kind of your spiritual views are, or how you see this, but there's a lot of people feeling like that we're in a very revolutionary or transitional time here on planet Earth, collectively, everybody on the planet. Maybe
Yes.
we're in an ascension process, some have spoken of. Um, I feel that, as being aware of this happening, I'm feeling the calling to want to reconnect with Earth.
Mhm.
I'm wanting more quiet time, meditative time in silence. I'm wanting to look at my own shadow stuff and heal and release, close old chapters and open new ones and all that. How are you, like yourself, dealing with that, or preparing for that, or what are you doing for yourself? And then of course I would imagine then you assist others in that as well.
Yeah, that is such a great question. I mean, I think there are a few different things. One is meditation and journaling. That's sort of my listening inward process, which helps me kind of connect with center, connect with wisdom, a greater wisdom, inner wisdom. Being a part of communities that I feel aligned with, supported by one of my dearest friends in my women's group. She has a fire circle in her backyard. So sometimes she'll do council circles there, meeting with my women's group on a regular basis, doing counsel, speaking what's in our heart. So I think also really connecting with the people that I feel like hearts are aligned with love and light and good, and like, what can we do, and how can we be the change? How can we, live in alignment? And then also my relationship with nature and the earth. So I do a lot of work outdoors, like with others, and my own kind of walking and sitting and being in relationship to land, and really asking questions of the earth. Because like I said before, I feel like there's a transpersonal experience that happens. One is the earth is alive, right? If we look at it from an animistic perspective, every being has its own essence, its own nature. And then we can look at it also from that metaphorical stance, that there's so much, all of the life and death and everything in between, like I said at the beginning. And like where I'm sitting right now, I can see the foothills in Boulder. I can see the mountains. And one of the pieces that comes to me is how old those mountains are, and how they have seen coming and going and life and death and, generations, and they're still here. They're still there. And feeling in some ways the impermanence of our culture right now, impermanence maybe even of humans, our species, but also this greater wisdom of the earth and the ecosystem that actually has wisdom to survive and keep going beyond the ups and downs and waves. So I would say all those different pieces are the things that really support me right now.
Wonderful. This has been such a cool conversation. I'm super grateful to your wisdom and experience and everything you've shared. If people want to learn more about you, your programs, how can they find you?
Great, thank you. So somaticnaturetherapy.com. It's Somatic Nature Therapy Institute. And then we also have Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, LinkedIn, and I think it's Somatic Nature Therapy on there as well. And on the website, we do therapy. We do a lot of trainings online as well as in person. We do... what else? Oh, rites of passage work. So we have actually wilderness quests that people can come on. So there's a lot of different information on there. There's also a page with kind of different free downloads. So a lot of the different things I talked about, if people want to look at for the ceremony creation guide or we have nature meditations and all sorts of different things if they want to get some resources.
Love it. And we'll put all of that in the show notes so people can just click on and find all these wonderful resources you've spoken about. Thank you so much for your time and your gift that you be to us and to the world.
Thank you. Thank you for all you're doing. So great to have a conversation with you about these things that are so important.
Yeah. And it's been exciting to cover some territory we haven't really explored yet on the podcast. So it's been fun for me too. Thank you so much to the audience for tuning in. If you have liked this episode, please do like, subscribe, share, rate, review, all the things that will get those algorithms to get this information out there in the hands of people who need it, because there are many, many people who are feeling lost, ungrounded, searching, struggling. And I think some of the wisdom that was offered today in this podcast could really be a gift to some of those folks. So let's get this info out there. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Katie. And we'll see you next time on Kaleidoscope of Possibilities.
Thank you for joining me for this episode of Kaleidoscope of Possibilities, Alternative Perspectives on Mental Health. This has been Dr. Adriana Popescu. If you enjoyed this episode, please like and subscribe and share with others. To find out more about me, my guests, and more, please visit my website at adrianapopescu.org. See you next time.